Behn Gillece stands out as one of today's leading vibraphonists, celebrated for his virtuosic technique, compelling compositions, and deep-rooted connection to jazz tradition. With influences from iconic artists like Milt Jackson and Bobby Hutcherson, Behn has established himself as a trailblazer in the modern jazz scene. He blends innovation with a reverence of the genre's rich history. A New Jersey native, he honed his craft in the vibrant jazz communities of Philadelphia and New York City, where he continues to thrive as a bandleader, sideman, and educator. Through his artistry, Behn leaves an enduring mark on the global jazz landscape. So Behn, good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks for having me, Abe.
Behn, you've been in this game for quite a while. You started playing at venues like Smalls, a long, long time ago. You've toured, got to played with some great artists. So I'm sure you've had some people who have helped you along the way. Has there been a mentor of yours that's maybe changed the way you think about this music, who stands out when I ask you that question?
Um, I think there's quite a few mentors, so it's hard to kind of answer that because I think at every point that I've started my musical journey, there's been different people that have kind of come along and helped push me in the right direction. From the beginning, I had great teachers when I was in high school that pushed me in the right direction. Professional players in Burlington City that helped me out by putting me on their gigs, and it was very useful for me. My band director in high school, David May, was a great teacher, great performer, and my drum teacher, Joe Meckler. Um, they kind of got me off to a good start. They encouraged me to go to Rowan. That's where I teach now. It's also where I did my undergrad. And when I was there, I had the chance to uh, study with a great classical percussionist, Dean Witten. And even though I went the jazz direction, he was very supportive of my decision to pursue playing vibraphone and going out of the classical track.
Well, I don't
And when I
know. I don't know. I don't know exactly who's on the Rowan faculty. You can, elaborate on that if you want to. But you're a true jazz artist. I mean, do you feel like when you joined the faculty there, you gave it um, almost like a life in a sense? Because I would think that when it comes to who you are as a player.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there's a number of people that have brought some different things to the table teaching there. One of my colleagues, Brian Betts, that I play with all the time, he was a student when I was there, a little older than me. We play together all the time, and he's on the faculty there. And we both, Dennis de Blasio is the director there, so he kind of pushed both of us in the right direction when we were students, and he still teaches there. So we have an association with him. And I remember that when I was studying with Dean, who was a great classical percussionist, when I wanted to play jazz, he pushed me in the right direction to study with a great Philadelphia vibraphonist, Tony Maselli, who I work with to this day, and we performed together in different groups. And he was a mentor for still is, but he really kind of he was the one that kind of really started to show me how to really play vibes, not just in a musical sense, but how to function as a vibes player. Because there's obviously a logistical thing with the instrument. It's hard to get around. It's difficult to play when you're in a big city. So he was the one that kind of had all these practical pieces of advice, like, oh, you should get this instrument and get a cart and own two of them and that kind of, like he was very helpful outside of just the playing component aspects of it, which really helped me out. Um, but yeah, then from there, I think, I lived in New York for a few years, did my grad studies at Purchase. I took lessons with David Hazeltine for a couple of years, who was a big influence
When it comes
for,
to harmony, you can't get any better as a teacher, probably.
yeah, that was really eye-opening for me. And through him, I met tons of different musicians. And when I was in the program at Purchase, at the same time, Spike Wilner, who owns Smalls and Mesro now, he was a student there finishing a master's degree that he had started when he was younger, and we just kind of intersected at the right time. And he was very helpful in a lot of ways. And he was one of the people that he ended up, interestingly enough, he took ownership of Smalls halfway through that year when I met him. And so when he took over at Smalls, we were playing a lot together, and he had this idea, well, I'm going to get a vibraphone for the club. So he actually bought a set of vibes for the club, and that was really helpful, just to be able to go out, hang out, pull out the instrument in the corner and be able to sit in with people.
I don't think people
And
realize how great that must have been for you. Like you're saying, like, oh, it was made my life much easier. But for anyone listening who doesn't know, like, not every place has vibraphone in it. Very, it's special to that it's there. Makes your life
yeah,
easy.
yeah, and living in New York is, it's quite intimidating. For me at the time, I didn't know anything. I knew I needed my car, so here I am, with a car, trying to drive everywhere, trying to figure out, oh, where am I going to park? Where am I going to load? Where am I going to, because there's just, as I mentioned before, the logistical thing with the vibraphone, it's a lot. And so just to have people like Spike who were looking out for me, I mean, that was a huge thing, because then through him, I was able to play with other people and also play a lot of his gigs. And he brought a lot of different people to his gigs. And I felt like I had the chance to meet a lot of players that I otherwise may not have had the chance. And he kind of really fast tracked that, I think. It was very amazing, for the first year or two being in the city.
No, that's awesome to hear. You know, Ben, you've been doing this for quite some time, and the relationship with your instrument is such a personal one, especially with such a unique instrument like the vibraphone. Um, how is your connection with the instrument evolving over the years? Um, in 2024, like if your instrument could speak to you, what do you think it would say?
Um, I don't know. That's a great question. I know that what I've thought about the instrument from where I started to where I am now has somewhat evolved a little bit. Even players that I, um, really look up to, because I think when I first started playing, I was, more focused on the tradition and transcribing a lot of Milt Jackson. And from there, I think I got more into players like Bobby Hutcherson and just, not just vibraphonists, but like also other instrumentalists of that era. That was very eye-opening for me, the post-bop kind of stuff. But I think the past couple of years, and I've always really liked Gary Burton a lot as a player, but I've really um, started to check out many more of his albums in the past couple years, like just pretty much going through all of them and trying to, really study like his different projects. And I guess to answer your question, like for me, like those are my three favorite players on the instrument. And so I try to I guess do things that kind of not exactly, it's not like you're copying, but like things I feel like they all bring a different strength to the
Yeah,
instrument.
well, Ben, I wanted to ask you this because the like we're talking, there really aren't as many jazz vibraphonists as there are, let's say, jazz guitarists or jazz pianists or jazz saxophone. There are few and far between. Not to say that they're, any less important or anything like that, but you have less to draw from when you're learning the music. Now, does that make the learning process a little easier in a sense because you feel like you have more room for interpretation, or is it harder because you wish you had more to draw from, in a sense, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, the answer to that depends on, I guess, what aspect of music making what angle I look at it from. Um,
Just improvising, just being an improviser.
Yeah, being an improviser, I don't think there's so many great improvising musicians. I mean, you could transcribe any saxophone player, any instrument, and just transcribe solos and really learn a lot from anyone. And I think it really translates perfectly fine to the vibraphone. And usually, there's certain things on instruments that don't, but for the most part, I think you can go with any other instrumentalist to develop good vocabulary. I think that the harder aspect of playing the vibes, um, comes more with the four mallet playing, comping, and being in a rhythm section. And those are the kinds of things where I feel like it's a little more difficult because when you talk about not having a whole lot of tradition of vibraphone compared to other instruments, I feel like that's really something um, that's a little harder to figure out, And I guess coming back to what you were saying before about, where do you see the instrument going? And, I think that's what a lot of players now are trying to figure out. Where does this instrument really lie? Is it a rhythm section instrument? Is it a solo instrument? And most vibraphonists I talk to seem to have a different opinion about it. Some people really stick to playing it as a solo instrument, as if they're a horn. Other people are really into the four mallets and accompanying. And so, you can get so many different interpretations, but I would say that's where I think, it's difficult to tell, um, to give you I guess to figure out what you're doing in a sense is harder from the
No, that's a
rhythm
great
section.
that's a great answer. I've always wanted to know that, and you answered that perfectly. Now I'm also curious, as the player that you are, you've written songs, you know a ton of standards. What standard for you is just a timeless one, like that it's just never gonna get old? Maybe it gets old like once in a blue moon, but what's a song for you that just feels really personal that you just love to play no matter what?
Um, Wow. I mean, it's it's hard to narrow it down, I suppose. Um, I've always like I guess it depends on what I'm looking for, like I mean, I guess if I were to think of certain standards, like if you go ballad, up tempo or whatever,
Let's go
like
opening tune at a jazz club. Like you just have to go tonight and you're just gonna call standards. Like what's number one, do you think?
I guess the one I haven't been playing as much lately, but that I've always been able to draw on. I really like Love Walked In. That's one of my favorite standards. And then I like I don't know, Lullaby of the Leaves is a nice tune to play. I feel like I can always rely on that, or You in the Night and the Music's always a nice tune for minor. Up tempos, I like playing Will You Still Be Mine. I play that one a lot. Um, and yeah, I mean, those are a couple of the ones that seem to always come back around for me, even if I don't play them for a while. I feel like those are some of the ones I've called the most on gigs that I do.
Great. No, that's great. No, it's gonna this question is gonna get a little trickier. This is where we're gonna go down the rabbit hole. We all have an inner critic or have had an inner critic that was more present when we were younger. There's moments of, doubt or on stage or, when you're just figuring this thing out. How do you deal with that? As you're, trying to evolve and become a professional player.
Um, yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
There's a lot of young jazz musicians, who are saying, I don't know if I can do this, even though they love it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, do you mean doubt as in like the from a musical angle or a business angle?
Well, let's just say like, I just can't figure out how to improvise the way I do on the bandstand as I do when I'm in my house or something like that.
Mm. Um, well, I mean, I think, yeah, I guess everybody goes through some kind of version of that. I think it's different because, I never used to think about these things. I guess the way I think of them now are a little bit different because it took me a long time to figure out Um, eh, what's unique, I think, about playing a lot of different jazz gigs are that we're playing in environments that are often noisy. There's not a whole lot of silence. Like I feel like as a classical performer for the most part, maybe you play in a recital hall, maybe, or some kind of concert hall where nobody talks, nobody's saying anything, you have silence. And when you practice for that and you're in a silent room practicing, um, it's kind of a good scenario, I think, for preparing for a concert, right? Well, the same doesn't really hold true for a jazz artist, right? Because you spend time practicing in an environment where you probably have some peace and quiet to concentrate. But then you go on a gig and people are shouting and it can be really loud. And so there's no way to prepare for it 100% the same way. And so I really think the only way to do it right is to kind of put yourself in both situations as possible. Like obviously you want to work as hard as you can at your instrument and practice really hard, but it's also important to just get out there and play and deal with the elements and make the adjustments that you have to make. And I know for me, a lot of times that means doing things that I don't necessarily like to do. Like, when I'm at home, I might have, a certain mallet that I use and it has a really nice sound on the instrument. But then if I get to a gig and, I might not be able to hear it, and that's going to kind of psychologically mess me. So maybe I use some harder stick that I don't like. And, I'm sure everybody goes through that to a certain extent. We put a setting on an amp. We don't usually go, a certain volume past the point where we don't want it, but we're just trying to deal with the situation. So I don't know. I think to answer that question, I think it does it the main thing that I've been thinking about is acoustics lately, as simple as that may sound, but it never is a simple thing to figure out.
No, I think no, that's a great answer. Um, you're a little older now. Um, you have this position at Rowan University. You've got a chance to work with great people. Success is a very personal thing. As a jazz vibraphonist, a professional musician, what does success mean to you? How do you define success at this point in your life, you think? Because a lot of people, oh, I have this many followers, or I played in this club, or I got to play with this person. But what is success for you?
Um, well, I think I try to keep that thought pretty simple for the for the most part. Uh, to be honest with you, I never had high aspirations as a musician. As a teenager, I got into music when I was about 14. And when I think about that version of myself, um, getting to perform for the first time, it was like really cool. And from there, like then all of a sudden I started to see what was out there a little bit and maybe had the thought, oh, I want to play here and I want to play at this place and that place. And then I got to do that, which was incredible. And I feel like every couple of years that I've been in the business, the goals have kind of changed because, well, I, set out to do this and got there. What's
Yeah,
next?
you experience these things, then it's like, exactly, what now, right?
Yeah, so I mean, so that's a great question. I couldn't even tell you what now, to be honest. I mean, there's so many things that I never really thought about doing that I've been able to do. And so, in a sense, I'm very happy with what I've done. Of course, there are certain things like I think everybody feels like no matter how much we're out there playing, it's like we feel like we could have a little more or be doing more of or this or that. I guess I don't really travel as much anymore. I guess I wish I could do that a little bit more, but that's become difficult logistically. I haven't really had much of a desire to do it for the most part. Um, Although I do from time to time miss it.
Yeah.
And, there's other things that certain gigs that I used to have that I don't do much anymore. So, there's little things like that, but then other things seem to pop up, and I feel very lucky to be able to do what I do, and I
No,
love a lot.
It's ebbs and
So
flows, and like it's just there are different phases. It's never just one thing. Gigs come and
yeah,
go, places open and close. You work with different people. It's always changing, just like the music is in the moment.
yeah. I mean, and I mean, I live pretty close to Philly. Cellar Dog in New York just opened up another spot in Philly,
You live
and
near Cherry Hill, right? Something like that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, Cinnaminson, yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, pretty close to everything down here, and so that's a new venue that just popped up. I've been playing there a lot, so things feel good right now. It's kind of like there's some new stuff, and so it's feeling good. But yeah, it's just it's just like you said, certain opportunities, things come up, and then it's definitely an ebb and flow kind of situation with music.
Yeah, I know that's a great answer. You did have some great teachers growing up. You mentioned in high school some people were very helpful and that kind of pushed you in the right direction. But if you could go back now and give your younger self some advice that would have made things a little bit easier along the way, you think you would have told the younger Ben anything, or maybe you should do this or not do that, that sort of thing?
Um, I guess that's hard to say because if you're happy with where you are, then it can't really happen that way. Like there's certain things that happen and it kind of, like I mean, I guess I could to a certain extent, maybe I could think of a couple little things. But yeah, there are a lot of things that I feel like happen for me that were kind of weird luck in a sense.
Well, I feel the
And
same way, believe it or not.
yeah, and it's like because of that, you almost have to be happy that things, went that direction because otherwise, I don't know if everything was uh worked out in a different way, maybe I wouldn't play jazz, for example. Maybe
Yeah,
I'd
well,
still,
no, no,
you
no.
know.
Well, because I'm like the way I'm thinking about it is like, oh, like I certain situations that happened to me when I was younger, working, I feel happened kind of too soon, and I wasn't playing the way I would like play now, for instance. But I may not have gotten a chance to play those situations later in life, So it's weird in
Yeah.
that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I look at a lot of other musicians that really they had an early start or somebody that's, was able to get them doing something before a certain age and then they have these tremendous advantages. And I do think about that sometimes. And I think, what if I had those opportunities or um but it's hard to get an idea of what something would be like if you had those opportunities. Maybe, you wouldn't have the same spirit in playing or something, like I don't know. It's hard to really to think about that.
No, no, this is great. Ben, before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you um, one more question. Is when it comes to being grateful, you said you are very grateful for, where you are in your career. But there are also other things you would really like to be doing. Are there any like venues you would still that are on your bucket list sort of thing, or certain musicians you would really like to work with who you feel like you could really just click with how you haven't gotten to work with them? Does anyone come to mind?
um I don't know. I mean, it's I never really thought about it too much. Like you know well, my one ongoing relationship I've had with Posi-Tone, with recording with them, has introduced me to so many different musicians that um, wonderful musicians that I might just never have thought to put myself in a playing situation with. And that's part of the reason I really like my um, the recording aspect of what I do because they've really put me in a lot of those situations, and I'm really into that. It's hard to, I'm not really. I hate to admit this, but it's hard for me to sit around and say, okay, if you could do whatever you want, what would you do? I'm not really that. great at that kind of thought. Like it's not that I don't have ambition in that way. It's just that it's almost like, and I don't think I'm the only one that feels this way. Like I think that there's a lot of musicians out there, and I feel like I personally fall into this category where an opportunity comes up and they kind of just roll with it and they're into it. And that's kind of what Posi-Tone's been like. There's been a lot of situations where they put me with people where, to be honest with you, I didn't know if I would gel with this person or that person. And you get into the session and it's like, and it's better than you would have thought. A lot, it's like a very pleasant surprise.
No, this is
Uh,
that's a great answer.
yeah, so I'm kind of more into to that. I feel like if you put yourself out there a lot and you just take advantage of certain opportunities, um, it's almost better when it's kind of a surprise. I know it's kind of a cop out answer,
No,
but
that's fine. That's totally fine. I mean, we just want everyone to be honest. So, Ben, where can everybody find your website, social media, that sort of thing, if you just want to plug that?
Oh yeah, well, it's just my website's just my name, Ben Gillece, and my name, Ben with an H, so BehnGillece.com. And then all my social stuff's connected to the website. But it's same thing with all the social stuff. It's just my name. I
All
think
right.
my Instagram name is underscore between first and last name or something. So
Awesome.